did workshop.
How we officially started?
Yeah, now we're officially starting. You guys, this is Debrickashaw Ferguson. We are sitting in the beautiful Salmagundi Club today. They were so generous to host us in their space. It is the oldest art club in all of New York, which is pretty magical. And we're fortunate to sit down with Debrickashaw.
Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming. Okay, so just so you know, this man drove 2 hours to come in today. And I just had this feeling we were supposed to sit down at noon. And I'm like, just knowing your character and your discipline and everything else, I was like, he's going to be early. And sure enough, 11:45, he arrived.
I think that's all luck. You give me too much credit.
No. And then 2 days ago, you messaged and you asked me what you should wear.
Right.
And I was like, something, super casual. And then this morning I woke up and I was like, that man's not going to be casual. He's going to be wearing a little button-down shirt. And I was like, I got a match.
I was going to throw a suit on, but I was like, you know what? Let's just keep it cash.
Keep it cash. This is what I think is so interesting about you, because people know you're going to show up a certain way. They match you.
Again, that's
sure
all coincidence.
That's all coincidence. I don't think so. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give you a little backstory about who this man is. Correct me if I'm wrong in anything. Okay. So Debrickashaw was an offensive tackle for the New York Jets from 2006 to 2015. He was the 4th overall pick in the 2006 NFL draft by the Jets. He was selected for the Pro Bowl 3 times. In his entire career, he never missed a game, never missed even a practice, was never on the injury report, and only missed 1 snap, and that wasn't even your fault. It was because of a trick play. And so you played 10,707 snaps out of a total of 10,708. Okay. You were inducted into the Jets Ring of Honor in 2022, and you were one of only 22 players in that select group of people being honored. Yeah. Pretty impressive career.
Thank you.
Really incredible. So I want to talk about all the things that you're doing today and things in the future. But I also first thought it would be interesting to talk about your career briefly from this POV, having retired 8 years ago. How you look at your career now that there's a little time and space. Like, are you even more proud of yourself today for all of your accomplishments than you were then?
I think so often when you're in the moment doing things, you don't reflect on the journey as much. You're really focused on the next step or the next game or the next year. How can I improve? That's very much a sports or athlete's mindset, right? We don't kind of talk about the things that went well. We try to work on the things that didn't go well and put ourselves in the best position to have success moving forward. And I think when it stops, it really forces you to sit down and look at that time and reflect. I think I'm very grateful because I know a lot of my peers had many different types of careers. And it wasn't for a lack of effort or a lack of trying. Sports, like games, can sometimes be unpredictable. And I think one thing that my coach taught me was, we do all this just to give us an opportunity to be successful. It doesn't guarantee anything. You can work hard, you can do the things that you're coached to do, you can make the plays, but it doesn't guarantee anything. It just gives you an opportunity for success, to win. I was at a movie, premiere, and Will Smith had said, he talked about, hey, you can do all these things. I could show you exactly what I've done, but that doesn't mean that if you do the exact same thing that you're going to have the same type of result. Yeah. And I do believe that. So it makes me even more grateful to be in a space where we can sit down and people like yourself who's listening to this interview can reflect and appreciate, man, all these things happen. Because it didn't have to happen that way. It was nothing that was mandated that it had to go a certain way.
Well, what do you attribute that to
I'll look. To be honest with you, I think it's God, and I'll say this because when I grew up, I had open heart surgery. When I was about 8 or 9, and at that time, my cardiologist had informed me that I would never play any contact sports. So when I talk about it not being a guarantee or automatic, I had to fight for the opportunity to even play football. And then for it to go the way that it did, I don't know that anybody could have envisioned that, especially for somebody who was already handicapped in a certain way.
So do you feel like when your cardiologist told you that you couldn't play any contact sports, was that a powerful motivator for you, like hearing no?
Well, yes.
Or that you can't?
At that time, I was in martial arts with my family, and
Which he has a black belt in karate, a brown belt in taekwondo.
That's that. I mean, that's. I feel
Right?
like that.
Facts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It was, much obviously when I was much younger, but it did seem as though I was looked after a little bit more, and understandably so. Your son or your child has surgery. You want to protect them, so they were giving me extra protection, or they were making sure that I couldn't do certain things. And I think just how I was being handled, whether it be in karate or at school, I wasn't allowed to go to recess for a time. Um, it does play on your mind a little bit, even at that very young age. Oh, I can't do these things. I'm unable to. I'm not strong enough for it. I'm going to get hurt. And I think I was looking for an outlet. Football, particularly at Freeport, we had a lot of athletes that were phenomenal. Our football team was, phenomenal. And so it's like you look to the thing that inspires you. I was like, man, if I could play on that team, then that'll prove to everyone that I'm able enough, or I'm strong enough, or I'm tough enough. And I think in many ways, my football journey has been that, whether I'm proving it to myself or to others that, no, I'm capable. I can do this. No. Yes, I'm tall and skinny, but I can go against the best defenders and have success. And I think that was a constant. When I got to the league, I was drafted high, and typically when you're drafted high, there's an expectation that you make an immediate impact.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't so automatic. My first practice, I went against a 13-year vet. His name is Kimo Bonhoeffer. He played in the Super Bowl. He's on Pittsburgh Steelers. And I had speed, I had quickness, but he had power and experience. So for me, it took a little while to understand what was necessary to have success in the league. And I felt as though people were doubting my ability to have success in my earlier years. I talked to some previous coaches and they said, yep, we didn't know about you. We didn't know,
Really?
don't know it was going to work out. And I'm like,
Damn,
so
yeah.
a lot of that fuels,
Yeah.
that passion to say man, I don't want anybody to doubt my abilities or what I can do, and that was when I talked to my strength coach and I said, hey, we got to make a plan. Anything you tell me to do, I'm buying in. And that was kind of the path to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
That's what seeded that. So.
It feels like you had enormous discipline. The fact that you never missed a game, never missed even a practice. I don't know how many other football players can say that. I don't know how many people can say that in life in general for anything. That's incredible. Do you think that discipline was something that was taught and learned, or do you think that that was something that's just innate to you, DeBerkashaw?
Well, I want to say none of that to me was conscious, meaning I didn't intend not to miss a practice. I didn't intend to, be there every day for 10 years. At that point, I just assumed that's what it was.
Yeah.
Go to work. When we go to practice, there's doctors and nurses at the facility. So if you're feeling sick, you're going to go to work and they'll see you. There's no I'm going to see my own primary. No, they're right there. So
Yeah.
there wasn't a sense of,
There would have been a reason to miss it.
there wouldn't be a reason. And this was my career. This was what I am learning. This is what I know. Now, I will say, a lot of that falls on, I guess, how I grew up, whether it be the structure that was in place. School, you're expected to go to school every single day. You're expected to show up. The church I was in, very disciplined approach. My parents, very disciplined. So there was just certain expectations that this wasn't something that was, I didn't know another approach. This was the only approach that I had been shown. So me showing up to my job and just, doing my just things that I've seen my parents do. I can't remember my mom taking a sick day. She's a nurse. She's done school nurse teaching, private duty, worked in the hospital, but she was always working. My father, same thing. Sometimes he worked two, different careers at the same time. And I didn't see anybody staying home because they weren't feeling, I just didn't see it. So it wasn't something that I could say, well, if you, need a personal day or are not up to snuff, that you can find time for self. You just go.
Okay, so obviously, when you're playing in the league, you are training and practicing and maintaining your physical strength every day, maintaining and building and improving upon. But mentally, was it ever a struggle to stay on track mentally? Did it ever wane? Did you ever feel discouraged or struggle in that capacity? And if so, how did you get yourself back on track?
Well, when you say mentally, can you
Yeah, like I'm
elaborate?
imagining, like, say you lose a game, you're replaying that one, because I heard you say in an interview that there were passes that happened or plays that happened 7 years ago that still, when you were playing, would sit and replay in your mind.
Okay.
And I feel like that there's like a mental game as much as there's the physical game. Was that ever overwhelming? Was it ever difficult to be like, get back on that field even if you lost the game before and be like, I got this, I'm great, I can do this?
I would say, football is equally physical as it is mental. I don't think one has a bigger, for example, if you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you can't play. If you don't know what you're doing, you make a lot of mistakes, you can't play. If you're not able to turn the page, this really bad play happened, it can destroy your whole game. It could be one play that was bad, and oftentimes, as people, I mean, this isn't even specific only to sports. We have negative self-talk, right?
Yeah.
And that can allow us to spiral to a place that we don't have to go. Everything that we feel and think isn't necessarily the reality of our situation. And so what could start as, oh, that didn't look so bad, can really spiral to something that's, okay, now we have an issue. Now your lack of paying attention caused this person to get hurt. Your lack of paying attention caused, a collateral effect. So in sports like life, you have to get good at, okay, I'm not happy about that, but I got to move on. We can deal with this later. And then once the week is done, you really got to wipe the slate clean because you have a new opponent, new challenges. Yes, some things trickle from week to week, but you can't spend so much time looking in the rear view that you crash.
So you combat it by just choosing to put it aside.
That compartmentalization is really big. I think sometimes that can work very well in sports. I think you have to be careful how you do that in also the real world, because sometimes you do need to be in tune with like your emotions and feelings. Whereas in sports, I think sometimes it's easier to just put that in a jar. Like we'll come back to that another time.
So actually, just thinking of that, then that's really interesting. So if you had to learn how to compartmentalize emotions in sports, was that difficult then to go from that back to real life with your family and things happening there and be able to be emotionally connected?
I would say yes, in the sense that how I might handle a situation in sports may not be the best or the same way I should handle things in a relationship, or talk to my children, or deal with my life outside of sports. sports is kind of a tougher environment. You do have to have thick skin. All that doesn't necessarily cater to um, situations outside that environment. I think when you're think, for example, I don't know that I would tell my coach, I just don't feel good. I don't feel good as a person. I don't. My feelings are hurt when you yelled at me. But I
You
don't.
wouldn't do that?
I don't know that I would do that. But I might think it has value if you're having a conversation with someone and saying like, "Hey, how you're talking to me is very disrespectful, and it does hurt my feelings."
Mm-hmm.
I think uh, because I'm gonna respond to that, right? Like if you're talking to me in a way that's negative, it might build like resentment in me, and that's gonna come out negatively in relationship. However, in sports, it's less about the relationship between, let's say, me and coach. Or it's more about like, okay, how can I get better? I'm a constant. I'm like Clay. I'm constantly like need to improve all the time. There's never a time where you don't need to improve. You'll hear those cliches. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no I'm maintaining. Um, but I think in relationship, it does require a sense of like, how am I feeling about what we're doing? Let's just stop. Let's just talk about the now. Because I think when you can get deep and honest with self, then you can be a better person to this partner or friend or daughter or whoever, because there's a level of honesty that you're engaging. And the hope is that that other person or daughter or friend uh, cares, right? And so there's that mutual exchange. That is a little bit like I can't just bring what I learned in sports to that. It's different, and I think there's some unlearning that happened and that was necessary once I left sports because I didn't find that everything that worked in sports just worked in other areas of life.
Did you initially try to do that and learn that was?
Well, there was only one way, right? If you play, when I say sports, it's not limited to football. It's any other sport that I played, martial arts, anything. It's a different arena, and there's different rules to having success. That I think when I say different, not sport to sport, but outside of sports, inside of sports.
Yeah.
As I kind of just expressed, like I don't think it's exactly the same, but when you do those things and you find yourself in a lot of regimented places, whether it be I'm in church or I'm in school or there's a level of expectation of growth, and I think it can get confusing when you take yourself out of that environment and just try to have relationship and put that aside because that's what you've learned brings success. So why wouldn't that bring success in these other areas?
You talk a lot about spirituality, and I know that you got a degree in religious studies in only 3.5 years. And I know that you've also mentioned, I don't know if you went to therapy, but you mentioned therapy is also being helpful to self-exploration. Would you say that it was a combination of all of those things that helped like you as a person recognize that difference between sports and who you had to be there and find an inner knowledge of yourself and emotions?
Yes.
That makes sense.
I'll say, one, I definitely believe in therapy. I believe it's important to normalize it. I don't think it should be something that's otherized, but, or I should say, and I think you learn a lot through the things that happen well in life and the things that don't always happen so well in life. I've been through a divorce. I've had to leave football and figure out, well, who am I now, right? I think at this point, it sounds very cliche, but it's real. You've been on this mountaintop, you've had this experience, and yet where does that position you to do? What's next? There's no one exit point, right? To where and then, hey, you're going to go into this. So I think finding that connection, being in a space of trial and error, it does, you see yourself differently, right? And I think all these things kind of play a role in learning about self. I don't know who said it, but you learn about who you are, not always through the positive times and the challenging times, right? And I've become a big fan of David Goggins. There is no sense of this, I've arrived. Like, you're always trying to figure out, well, who am I in this space? You've said a lot of wonderful things about my career as an NFL athlete. Happened, 10 years ago, right? So am I only living in the shadow of the fact that I did this really great thing in my life?
No.
Right? It's like, well, how do I kind of
Right.
continue the journey? Do I only fixate on the fact that I was this, or this didn't work? It's like, okay, these things happen. You take what you can from it. That might be a football, or sports kind of thing where you kind of learn what you can from it and you kind of move on. But I would also say you do have to take time to kind of be in that moment and emote, or have the ability to talk through some of the things that maybe just aren't true. Typically when we have challenges in life, we're like, oh, I didn't do well here. But then you might combine other things. Well, because I didn't do well here, that means I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, I'm not good at that. And that's not true. One thing that I guess therapy has taught me was, okay, this didn't work out. You are still great at this. You're still strong at this. It doesn't impact that unless you allow it to. So this is the life journey we're on.
It is a life journey. There are things that we do on this earth, and then there are the things that we are. And your character is something that I really want to talk about, because it's the thing that drew me to wanting to sit down with you in the first place. So this is going to perhaps embarrass you a little, but I have a couple of things that people have said about you.
Okay.
And I think that it says a lot and means a lot. So Willie Colon, one of your teammates, in one of these interviews said that you are, quote, the most authentic football player that ever graced the football field. And he basically said, if you have nothing nice to say, then you don't say it, because your goal is to always uplift, love, and respect the people that you're around, and you are, quote, a beautiful human being. Wrote to me, Paul, our shared friend, says, and this is all a quote, so these are all its words, it's so important in the world to have people who will sit with you in the valley. Our society is so geared towards the mountaintop moments, but it's always important to know who has your back in the valley moments of life. And I've benefited from knowing I have a brother who has my back 365, 24/7. I think you realize in that moment that you don't take life's tests alone. They're all group projects, your tribe and your village. I couldn't be more grateful for having Brick be such a key player in my tribe. He shows up in the most authentic and subtle ways, and sometimes those are the most powerful moments. So I couldn't help but notice that both of those people refer to you as authentic. What does that mean to you, and how do you show up for your friends, your family, your teammates in an authentic way?
I don't fully know, and I guess I said that because sometimes I'm shocked by those comments about me, right? Somebody might say something about me that I'm like, man, I didn't realize that that's how I was coming off, right? And I think that could be in a negative scenario, like, wow, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I did that. But also could be in a more positive scenario, like what we're talking now, where it's like, I didn't realize that that's the impact, I think sometimes I just try to present myself in a way that is honest, and I think when you have people who say things like that about you, that's, I guess they're commenting on what they're seeing, but I don't always, sometimes my mom is like this where, she does some amazing things. And then if I say, hey, Mom, you did this really great thing, she goes, oh, no, it wasn't. So I think
Too modest.
I think sometimes it can be difficult to listen to things like that. maybe it is the athlete mindset where it's like if you told me something negative, I'd be like, that's probably right. That's probably right. I could do better. I could work on myself and improve. But when you say something that's positive, where it's like I can't comment. I can't comment.
I think you're very humble. I think you're very modest. And I think that those are two incredible attributes and it makes you who you are. So I don't know if you've ever heard this, but Michelle Obama always talks about her kitchen table. The people that you hold close, that you can trust, that you know that won't judge you. And those people you just keep in your orbit.
Okay.
Who is at your kitchen table?
Well, it's interesting that you said trust and won't judge you because I feel like it's important to have people that are very honest.
Well, yes. Okay,
Right.
I should say don't judge you, but can still call you out for things and hold you accountable, but
Absolutely.
without judgment. So maybe that's the more full, well-rounded.
I think there's a lot of individuals. Stephanie, she's my fiance.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much. We've been on this journey, and I think she's really allowed me to be in a better space in my life. Rotimi, our mutual friend, says that we share a lot of experiences. I grew up with him. I think was it all through, from elementary school till now, and I think it's rare to have those relationships that are as enduring. There's people at every kind of juncture in life that you kind of play different roles, and they don't need to play the same role. I met Ben Agelana. We had the same offensive line coach in college, so he experienced that coach in the NFL, and I experienced that coach in college. He started at a different team before coming to the Jets. And again, another person in my life that's been able to kind of help me and guide me. Willie, right? So Willie Colon and I, we always have like this love-hate relationship, but we've got a lot of battles together. I mean, the list kind of goes on because I don't think that everybody has to play the same role. And because everybody doesn't have to play the same role, like there's room at the table.
Okay, so I want to talk really briefly about the retirement moment and then to what you're doing today, which I think is so exciting. But I'm curious, how did you get to that decision? I would imagine it's been one of the most difficult decisions you've ever had to make. Mm-hmm. But how do you as an athlete know that you want to leave when you're on top, but not leave anything on the table?
It's highly personal. It's highly personal decision. I've seen it done many different ways. There's some people who play until they're pushed out. There's some people who can't play due to injury. There's some people who do retire. I think the misconception is I was passionate about football. I love football, but it is work. It is work. It stopped being high school football in high school. It changes every level. So yes, I enjoy the competition between myself and Dwight Freeney, myself and Julius Peppers, myself and anybody you name, right? But at the same rate, it does take a toll. It does wear on you. And I think as you get older in your career, you start making decisions like, all right, what's next? Mm-hmm. What's next for me in my football career? Do I see myself continuing to grow and have success personally? Am I going to go to another Pro Bowl? Those are like, to me, some objective measures. Am I going to hit another big deal? Are we going to have success as a team? What are the things that are keeping me here? There's one thing that we're not talking about, right? So just because I wasn't injured in a way or wasn't damaged, does that always mean that I wasn't going to be injured?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is like the health consequence, because obviously this is a very intense game.
We talk, we hear athletes with CTE. We talk about all these things that can happen as a result of playing a long time. So at what point do I say even to self, like, hey, we had a wonderful run. That we should be grateful for the fact that we are able to sit here even in this moment and have these conversations 10 years later, right? That's not everybody's testimony. So I think all these things kind of swirl in your mind. And I met some things personally from an athlete. I was blessed to have some financial goals that I attained. And then I also thought of some of the health stuff where I'm like, man, I've been very fortunate. Um, I could keep pushing. It doesn't mean that because I play another season, something wrong is going to happen. But if I had to stop now, perhaps this wouldn't be a bad time. I had some options as to whether I would continue with the same organization, uh, whether I wanted to not continue with the same organization, whether I just wanted to stop. And I think considering all the things that we just talked about in this moment, I just feel like maybe now is a good time to stop because there was no retirement. There's no official, hey, you play so many games, you get to retire, here's your benefit pack. Yes, there are benefits once you retire, but it wasn't like, I've seen athletes who got pushed out, like, hey, it's time for you to go. I've seen athletes that just continue to hang on. I've seen athletes that have been, physically broken because of the nature of the game. And so I just was like, man, how do I want to leave this? I think the one thing that I wanted for myself, and this is kind of where it's important to get into that quiet space, because some things you can only answer for yourself. Whether I wanted to continue playing or not is not really a question that other people can answer for me. I can get all the input. I can weigh those pros and cons, but it's me that's on that field that has to perform. So when I got to that quiet space and was able to talk to myself about what I thought I should do, I felt okay. I felt okay with not continuing after this point. I felt like I've been blessed, and I genuinely felt that. So leaving the game, yes, it's an emotional space. Yes, it's not like, okay, I'm gone, thank you. But I was able to accept the fact that this was a chapter in my life. I'm fine with it ending.
And you had made it like a whole decade, 10 years or 10 seasons is pretty significant.
Some decisions, that was not the only decision that I made in life, but some decisions are like, hey, this is something you're going to have to make.
Yeah. And nobody else can tell you what to do.
Nobody, I mean, you can get input, but nobody can really make that decision for you. Because, again, you have to live that out.
Yeah. And you have to trust your gut and know if it feels right in your heart and soul. Okay, something that I've been wanting to talk to you about is this idea of identity.
Okay.
So you, for your whole life before you retired, for most of your life, had been a football player. So you decide to retire. Was that difficult to take that part of your identity and kind of put it aside and look at yourself from a different perspective?
Well,
or see yourself differently?
It was difficult, but not. The difficulty grew as time moved on. Ooh. So it's an immediate decision. I'm still the Ferguson New York Jets. But as time moves on, it's like, okay, now I'm not the Ferguson New York Jets. I mean, I'm not, I still embody that, but I'm less of that. And what am I now? Mm-hmm. Right. And the more years or time that you're away from that, you're less of this and more of whatever you're creating or not creating. Yeah. And so it feels different, particularly when you have some life challenges that don't necessarily encourage a sense of joy and pride. It's not, you've left this mountaintop experience and now you're kind of walking down to this valley. And so the difficulty came in trying to define, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
I find myself in a space that is new for me. How do I create value for the person that I am today? How do I, it's sometimes you're pulled back into that world. Okay, if I do an event where I'm the Ferguson New York Jets, I'm back into that world. Yeah. But it's just for that moment, because then I'll come back and now I'm just the Britisher, this really tall guy who's walking around this community, right? Not everybody knows football.
Yeah.
that's not my expectation, right? Now, I
Right.
don't expect everybody to look at me and say, "Hey, I know who you are."
Yeah.
I expect people to say, "Man, you're really tall." Okay, excuse me. Can you get that for me? You know? So I think the challenge does come after time kind of grows, and I think earlier in our conversation we talked about like kind of really tapping into the self, right? Really being honest with like, okay, like having those conversations with who you are, how are you feeling in this moment. We talked about therapy. We talked about friendships that are important. Who's going to be at this table? Everything plays a role. So I think what was important is to build pillars, whether that be faith, whether that be therapy, whether that be friendships, whether that be the interest things that you're interested in doing. But it does come back to this idea of like, well, what's how can I tap into something that's bigger than me? And I think that idea of defining your why, finding that purpose, it kind of comes back full circle. I don't think it's purely a faith question. What's your purpose here on earth? There's this sense of, man, I need to be able to contribute to this cause that's bigger than me. I have to find what that is where I can be authentic. And if I don't do it in this way, it's not going to get done. And I think it takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of trial and error. It doesn't have to be purely in career. You can totally do it outside of career. But for some people, it's helpful if it is a part of career, right? Something that was lacking was that structure. Football, you wake up, you eat, you train, you have meetings. Everything is funneled through this structure. You can do your faith through church. They got Bible study there. You can do chapel. You can do your events, your friends. All your friends are people that you work with, right? You're in this kind of bubble. So when you leave that bubble, or that bubble begins to break down, whether you leave or people are starting to retire and go to different teams, people don't live all in New Jersey. People, football was a tie that allowed us to kind of have that glue. Now that that glue is kind of no longer as strong, relationships take work, right? So now you have to really go out there and say like, okay, well, what do we have in common? Like, I know we like to do these things, but
Yeah.
we're not seeing each other in the office every day and going through the same pain and struggle and working through, brothers in arms understand like what it is to be in this grind. That's gone. Now we have memories, but like, what are we doing now that's going to allow us to like, you know, thrive? And so, I feel like I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent,
No,
but
I loved it. Yeah.
yeah.
So then what did that journey, because I know at one point you were kind of investigating the financial world. Like you
Yeah.
were really interested
So
in,
it started with wanting to write. I'd done some writing with
oh, I didn't know that.
some publications. I'd written for Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated.
It's a
I'd done a couple of writing, and I thought my next step would be to like write.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's this weird catch-22 where you have an opportunity, like you're known enough to like have those relationships, but not necessarily qualified enough to like just move into a space. Mm-hmm. So not that every writer has to go to journalism school. I'm not saying that, but I didn't have experience enough where I felt like I could get hired. I wanted to be like on staff, like start this journey again. So I had some issues there. Did some things, did a blog, and then that just kind of like faded away.
And were those sports writings?
No, I mean, much of like what we're talking about now, I had a blog called The Perspective, and we kind of dig deep a little bit, like just different topics. I tried to revive it a little bit. I was going to work with another person I went to UVA with, and we were thinking about kind of reviving it, like making it more about, one thing they talk about writing is like writing honestly. So like writing about the things that you're experiencing. And so sometimes writing can be therapeutic, but it never really materialized. So that was like the writing aspect. Then there's, okay, maybe I need to do things closer to sports. So you do like a little broadcasting and do stuff on local TV and try to see if that's something that you want. But I quickly realized I enjoyed playing the game I didn't necessarily enjoy talking about the game. I didn't care to talk about it. I wanted to be about it and figure out my, plan and strategy to beat this opponent, for Sunday. So once I tapped into that, I realized that's not going to work. Then I moved to more of a financial space where I'm like, well, maybe I can just help athletes in their transition or understand, how to be more knowledgeable about the things that they're investing in. So that's where that started. Um, Again, I ran into a little bit of a wall where, did I want to work for a brokerage and try to attain my Series 7? Did I have to access, quote unquote, my address book, like all the people that I knew in order to like build my business? Did I have to move my, resources to whatever company I was working with in order to, and I was like, if I didn't want to do that, sometimes it seemed like there was some challenges there. But I had great experiences all throughout. And then I eventually even worked with my own financial advisor. And that was real helpful just in understanding like both ends, the client side as well as, speaking like the employee side. So my last role that I got into before, and it really helped me get into nursing, or at least the mindset of nursing, is when I interned as a strength and conditioning coach for the Jets. And so it was like a summer intern, did that.
And when was that in your
I would
life?
say like in the like maybe the 19s, 20 teens, like
Okay.
2019, 2018, something
Okay.
like that. And what was great about that was I dealt with players who were injured and we were trying to get them back to performance. I dealt with the training room staff, having conversations. I would deal with the scouting staff. So I would interact with all these different departments, but also I had my task, right? I had to clean the weight room. I had to set up certain things of the way that they needed to be. I dealt with nutritionists. So I'm like, man, this is really great. I'm interacting with all these departments.
Yeah.
I have a role. It's clear to me. And I'm like, man, I wonder what this is like outside of the football world, right? And it wasn't necessarily physical therapy or I wasn't looking for a direct line, but I was like, man, I'm wondering what like more of a science-based, medicine-based line would look like. And having conversations, and COVID happened, so I spent time with my parents, really talking to my mom about again, having these heart to hearts, having these open, honest conversations. All these things have happened. I've had all these experiences. I've had all these things that didn't really like fulfill me. Mm-hmm. They were exciting when it began, and I try to attack it just like I would, anything that I'm very passionate about. But I couldn't like maintain that passion to continue. And it was a little bit like depressing, where it's like, man, I'm doing all these things. My intentions are pure. I'm trying to learn everything I can, but I get to a point, and I'm just, man, this is not it.
Yeah,
it's not it.
I have to say, like, before we get to what you are working on now, it's just that exploration is so admirable. Like, that takes work to be constantly trying to find something different that fulfills you in the way that something else used to fulfill you. That's hard to do. And then it's hard to motivate yourself to seek out opportunities and then to get there every day. So I think that whole journey is so necessary, and we all go through it at some point in life. But it's definitely admirable that you just hop to, or like, what else can I do that's going to fulfill me?
I think we can also like romanticize that when somebody says, "Oh, you have all now you can do anything. Like, now you have this ability to try anything," and it's like that. Trying to figure out who you are is a very like naked process.
Oh my gosh, it's such hard work.
It's a very can be very disappointing process because you get to learn that you're not good at this. You get to learn that, oh, you need more qualifications here. You get to learn that you can do this, but it's going to cost you that. And it's like, to me, that wasn't a very fun process. to constantly bump into what you're not good at, especially when you left something that you were considered the best at.
Right. And it's like when you came from football, you had known for so long that you wanted to do this. And so you knew what you had to do to like get there. And then to go all of a sudden, I would imagine, into the world and not know what that path is would be hard. Because it's hard enough to get what you want when you know the path that you want to be
Right.
on. And then it's hard to be like, where do I go?
So the journey hasn't been, this like exciting, voyage. It's been a very challenging journey. It's been very, um, you start the journey away and then it begins to change, like, so, um, I think when I was, getting back to the idea of having these like honest conversations with my mother and father and getting to a place of like, who am I in this space? We were able to just kind of connect the dots, and we, again, took more small steps. Like, all right, let's go to community college. Let's see if I can even do medicine.
Was that scary going back to school?
Yes,
So long?
I went to the University of Virginia, and even though I graduated early, it was a very challenging experience. College was hard. I met some of the smartest people that I feel like, you think smart, and then you meet people who are smart, and you're like, okay, you're smart. I get it now. Like, straight A's in engineer school, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, this is different than just doing really well in like global studies. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, there's levels to this. So that was my first. And to me, it didn't matter then as much because I had football. I knew I was good at football. But when I didn't have football to lean on, and not even football, because I tried, okay, I'm going to leverage my opportunities using football. They didn't put me in a position that I liked. I was like, no, I got to like be qualified to do the thing, even if football wasn't here. And if football helps, then that's a bonus.
Interesting.
But if football's off the table, I need to know that I can do this. And I think I was looking for something like that. I thought, again, and I wasn't coming at this like, man, I can do anything. I was coming at this like, man, I've tried all these things that haven't worked. I don't know what I can do, like, I don't know. So I was nervous that I might have a negative experience in nursing. I might have a negative experience going back to school. I felt like I was a smart student, in high school. I didn't feel like, I was a poor student. But, going back to school and like taking classes again, I just didn't have that confidence that I didn't have confidence. And so I went to Bucks Community College. I retook, I never took, so I should say I took, your microbiology, you take your anatomy 1 and 2. You have to kind of figure out where you want to go and take prerequisites based on what they're asking. They're not all the same. So it does make it a little challenging, not too, but that's just a part of it. So you do that, and then you apply. And once you apply, then you start nursing school.
So you started last fall, right?
I started nursing school last fall, but okay. I've been, prior to that, I did 2 years at Bucks.
Okay. So you're starting your second year at nursing this fall.
Yes.
How's it going?
Good. Well, it's going well.
Okay.
Nursing school is challenging. I think it's one of the harder things that I've done academically. I think there's less room for, so when I was at Bucks, let's say I had a professor, and I'm like, I'm not feeling this connection here. I'm gonna try another professor teaching this. What time? Oh, yeah. Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Tuesday, Thursday works even better for my schedule.
Yeah.
In this cohort, there's less of that, right? Mm-hmm. I can't just say I'm gonna take this professor. So if I have a professor or a class that's challenging and it doesn't work for me, it's for me to figure out. Yeah. And it's not to say that every time you have a challenge, you look to scoot it, but specifically in college, there was that flexibility. Even when I went to UVA, I could take any class I want. It's my ability. I can set my own schedule, right?
This is kind of taking you back then to your football days,
This is
where
like
you had to suck it up.
this is like high school,
Yeah.
or you got
Yeah.
there's once you pick your course, like
You're
once you
gonna-
pick your degree, they plot your courses, and there's less wiggle room. So even though that's not the hard part, it does add to this sense of like, we're all in this together. What was interesting about nursing school, when I was doing my prerequisites at Bucks, I had a couple students that had, failed out of nursing school, and they were in my classes, and they were very good students as well. So it made me have a sense of like, oh, this is not an automatic.
Yeah.
This is, you can get in and still.
Yeah.
When I went to school my first semester, we had a couple students roll out of the program again. So it's like consistently at every level, there's a sense of this is not automatic. This is something that you have to really fight for. And so the program has been challenging because there's been that sense of like, you can't really be comfortable. You always feel like, again, I could be doing more. So you'll have your books on your phone. You'll be doing questions at inopportune times because of this fear that I need more. And then, you talk to some of the upperclassmen, and sometimes they allay your fears, and sometimes they don't. They're like, man, that was rough. It don't get easier. You're like, oh my gosh.
Is the fear a helpful motivator, or is that
I don't know.
not helpful?
I think sometimes, I don't like, this is something that I try to like live by, is like, I don't like fear to rule my life. I don't like to make decisions based off of fear.
Yeah.
Because I feel like those aren't the best decisions.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you have a sense of like, man, this doesn't have to go a certain way, and you've met people. This is not like a scare tactic. I've met multiple people where it didn't go the way they thought. I saw my class size shrink. Like,
is that scary to you? Does any part of you worry about whether or not you will be able to?
I think sometimes we, have that imposter syndrome. Like, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. Maybe this is something that somebody else could do, and so I think it doesn't always encourage you.
Yeah.
It definitely tells you that, there's a real possibility that this doesn't have to work out. And that's not very like encouraging. So you do have to just stay focused on the task at hand. You have to kind of leave those fears. Again, fear, you got to put that to a side. I found even in football, I could have a big opponent. But if I could look at what I did, hey, I practiced well this week. Every day after practice, I did extra. I did my film study. I worked on these techniques. I've been sleeping. I worked out real. Like if I could just go down the list of things that I needed to do that typically brings me success, then I can like kind of give it to God and be like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And the same thing with school. I studied. I did my practice exams. I reached out to my teachers. I did my little study group. We talked about the material. I feel good about. I've slept. And then the one thing that they say, and I think is important, to prevent burnout in school, you have to find things outside of school to do that you have value and a purpose. And so when we make school, even though it's this thing that we're trying to do so good at, the only thing, it's counterproductive. Mm-hmm. And so me, doing things outside of school has allowed me to like have more perspective. It has given me even energy to do my schoolwork.
You need something else outside of whatever it is that you're doing to help fill you up.
Yeah.
Where you are now, sitting in this place in life, is there anything that you would have told your younger self at any point along the way that you wish that your younger self had known?
It's an interesting question because I've heard this question before. I've seen how people have approached it. I would only tell my younger self, hey, do your best. I love you. I care about you. And, just take it one day at a time. Because the things that I've experienced now, that's too much of a responsibility to put on, those shoulders. And at the same rate, I don't want my younger self not to have the ability to like see life in the way that he sees it. Like take those opportunities, take those chances. Okay, I'm gonna let you know it didn't work out, but you know what I mean, like
yeah,
to have those experiences,
yeah.
because I think there's something in doing it for the first time. You know, I would just encourage him, man, just give a good effort. You know.
And then what do you think your 80-year-old self would say to you now in this period of your life, knowing that there has been a lot of exploration and different paths and figuring it out?
Oftentimes we look at things and you know, once we've experienced them, and it's like, man, we had so much anxiety or so much fear, and it's like it wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
It was just like a small
A
little
blip.
blip
Yeah.
on a much larger scale. Things that we don't necessarily fixate on may have way more importance and way more meaning than the things that we're so consuming ourselves. So I wouldn't be surprised um, if a lot of the things that I like, you know, found important or was trying to pursue, that, like me telling my younger self, it's like, you know what, just take it a day at a time.
Yeah.
Do your best. Everything that you're gonna do is not gonna work out, but that's fine. You know, that's for you to figure out.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think the information would be different.
Yeah. So this was incredible.
Thank you for having me.